I think we are ready to start. We wanted to do something that AI didn't want us to do. Okay, so I'm Carmine Ventra. I'm the head of the Department of Informatics, and this is what we call the Informatics Lecture. So this is one of the public events that we run at King's. And with this event, we really like to display how computer science is affecting society, and it's going beyond, just a few nerds in a garage developing stuff, and how we went from there to where we are now. And I couldn't believe our luck when Luciano said yes to our invitation. So there's so much I could say about Luciano that it's going to take all the time we have allotted for the lecture today. So rather than wasting your time listening to me, I think it's a much better use of our time listening to Luciano talking about the impact of AI on content creation and consumption. So let's welcome Luciano to King's.
If I have done my job, you should be able to listen. Yeah, it seems to be working. Excellent. Well, we do not have days to talk about the topic for today, but I do want to take at least a minute or two to thank you for this amazing invitation. It's been a long time, unfortunately, since I was in England, and I miss it, trust me, on the other side of the Atlantic. So, for obvious reasons, which I will not explain because I would like to go back, and I know we are online as well. So a big thank you for bringing me back home, and a thank you for anyone who is online. As I said, I will be careful with my big mouth not to say what I would like to say on what is going on the other side of the Atlantic, and that hopefully is the last remark I can risk. Apart from the following, which is, we were discussing something that is cultural, philosophical, computer science related, AI of course, but I cannot resist the temptation, and I shall not, to highlight how important it is what we're doing here at King's College, or generally at the university. You've seen what happens when universities get distracted and let their guard down. It's not an accident, that's human history. We are not meant to study, and we are not meant to enjoy the life of the mind. That is called education for a reason. Our normal standard attitude as a species would be to go on holiday with that $1 billion you won for a lottery. No one walks into a library the day after they won the lottery. They buy a new car. We need to remember that. Education is there to make us better than what we're seeing around here and elsewhere. So with that note, which is a bit of a reminder of why we need to do a good job and a better job, so that some kind of things that you have seen in the United States, or we saw just a few years ago, because I did have a vote, and I did vote against Brexit, not happening again. Now, with that out of the way, and my moment of political risky comments out of my liver, the topic for today. The topic for today is will be divided in 4 blocks, and the people, and I know at least 2 of them in the room who have been interacting with me, they've seen this before in terms of structure. So if you get lost at some point, this picture will show up again. So just wait for the map to appear again. There will be a quick introduction so that we can warm up. And then I will explain this fancy way of saying we live in a world where AI produces content for us instead of us. Post-Vitruvian, if you like it. It's a good way of looking smart at a dinner party when the robot is introducing you. We just saw the robot doing that. So what are you working on? Post-Vitruvian culture? That sort of normally goes some way towards killing any conversation. And then something about artificial intelligence, not because you need to agree with me, but I will be rather unorthodox there to explain what kind of artificial intelligence I have in mind when talking about AI, because that is the thing that helps us to produce the content, which is not the topic of the lecture. So we can start with a bit of introduction. This used to be a novelty. Now, we're landing on a new continent, the digital continent. We've been doing that for decades now. It's not a novelty. It's no longer a matter of discovering this continent. It's a matter of building our new society on this continent. This means that the responsibility of this generation is immense. Never in human history such a radical revolution has taken such a short time. The agricultural revolution took millennia, the industrial centuries, the digital is taking decades. If we don't feel the pressure of this pace, it means you didn't quite get it. Being so profound and so quick, it also unfortunately puts on the living generations the responsibility of establishing the foundations for the future. We get it right, someone in the future will say thank you. We get it wrong, they were just wondering what we were doing. With that, as I said, is a quick introduction. There are three sort of overall building movements, long-term architectures we're putting in place. Not a topic for today, but at least you have a bit of a framework. One, we are building this new digital reality. And since I thought there were at least two philosophers in the room, I will use the word ontology, which for some computer scientists is very confusing. Think in terms of ultimate nature of reality. So we're building this new digital reality as we speak. We are putting into this new digital reality, technically speaking, new forms of agency. That will be part of the topic for today, AI. And we are upgrading what we may call, in one word, modernity, which, again, should not scare anybody. It simply means that whatever good job we did with, for example, legislation until recently needs to be not redone, but needs to be increased and augmented by new elements. In other words, in the history of humanity, we're adding a new chapter. We don't throw away the old ones, but we need to write our own. And that is the normative chapter that we're writing today. For anyone thinking that is too vague and strange, thinking in terms of privacy that only a few decades ago were not in the textbook. Of course, today we got it ad nauseam. It's way too much. But it's part of this new updating or upgrading. In these three constructive sort of movements, we have also some short macro trends, and we finally sort of come into focus slowly on content. One, again, for the fancy party where you want to impress anyone, is the eclipse of the analog. In other words, we are concentrating our attention so much on digital profiles, for example, that we forget that those profiles belong to a human being. This is a concrete case, for example, when you go to a hospital. Piece of research that we're doing with some colleagues back at Yale, 7 steps in a diagnosis for someone, for example, having respiratory problems. First step, you actually meet the patient. The other 6, you only work on the digital profile of the patient. If anything goes wrong, you're doomed. The same thing with twin cities or sandboxes and so on. In other words, HR, education, etc., we are no longer seeing what lies behind. The system is eclipsed by the model. Not a problem necessarily, but something we need to be careful about. The hardware turn, which again is not for today, but we are realizing that while we're doing this thing, in other words, we are concentrating increasingly on the digital level, forgetting about the analog, we are also controlling the digital through the analog. For anyone who hasn't followed news, but I don't think anyone here, if you want to be careful, you need to know who owns the satellite, especially if you are in Ukraine. The undersea cables. where you build your data centers, how much electricity you provide for those data centers. Rare earth news today from Reuters. China has decided that all those rare earths, well, may not go in too far if the United States don't change policy, and so on. This is control of the, so to speak, analog, so that you can control the digital. And finally, agency as a commodity. You step forward, and if you're a philosopher, you bypass the little discussion, ChatGPT or Claude, but you start thinking in terms of, okay, one day it's just an agency on tap. What I can do with this, what can I throw this agency at so that it can actually work? The analogy between data and oil was terrible since day one, don't use it. The analogy between AI and electricity is just a little bit better. Equally dangerous if you put your fingers into the wrong socket, not because Terminator. At the same time, a commodity that can help to do a lot of things depending on what you use the electricity for. So this is, as I said, all in terms of background. What is this sort of topic for today? The automatic creation, generation of content through Gen AI. Why post-Vitruvian? So a bit of agreement about words. So we leave behind the framework. Content from now on until the end of this meeting will be this: well-formed, syntax, meaningful, and some semantics, data, because something has to bear the information, delivered to an audience. So my message in a bottle is content, depending on whether there is an audience there or not, but is meant for, through a medium, the bottle, the digital, the message. It could be interactive. So today, we forget that a lot of content is produced by computer games, for example. But of course, it's text, visual, audio, video, interactive content of that form. Why post-Vitruvian? Well, I needed to find a clear picture of what it means to think that if you find content somewhere, and then some humans have generated their content. And I remember high school being what it is, this story about a Socratic philosopher, Aristippus, who has a bit of bad luck, shipwreck, etc., and he ends up on this island. And he looks at, that is a much later picture, at the sand, and he sees some geometric patterns. And reassured, he says, well, we have nothing to fear, as I see the presence of men. Well, first of all, men, well, those were the days. But also remark for a moment how optimistic that is. Now, you end up on an island, instead of thinking, I'm going to be repatriated tomorrow because I see traces of humans, and those humans will be nasty and brutish, Hobbesian in a way. No, you're an optimistic guy. So, oh, surely we will be welcome here. This is narrated by Vitruvius, the same Vitruvius of Leonardo's sort of man, the Vitruvian man. So why post-Vitruvian? Well, because this is no longer true. And I'll show you a few things, or at least not directly true. We have plenty of content today that is not generated by humans. So you may end up, allegedly, thinking that there are humans in that room because you find that there is a cocktail, given that we just had that beautiful meeting today with the robotic group here. But that cocktail has actually been made by a robot. There is no inference. In other words, the content today is no longer necessarily leading to a human source. I know that you know, so this is mostly for some people maybe online who haven't seen this. So forgive me, you can close your eyes. I'll see you in 2 minutes. This is a simple prompt, 3 lines, hand pours milk, etc., and this is what you get. This is not generated by any human being. There's nothing there. There's no table, no milk, no nothing. We know. It's just a piece of Gen AI producing this. Beautiful. This was ages ago. It's an old piece. More recently, and I wonder whether the voice will be heard or not, but the voice is not necessary. This is what it looks like. And it's a couple of weeks old.
A force, a wild, untamed might. And she commands your awe with every breaking light.
There's nothing behind, if not a piece of AI trained on the right data to produce this, which is an amazing video. And by the way, it has only 5 fingers, which is already a great step forward. It goes on. Now, look at the hands of this gentleman. Again, totally Gen AI product. The two are talking.
They're watching the north exit.
They
Use
are
the service
a little bit
tunnel.
stiff. And now that you're told that this is an AI sort of content, you say, oh, yeah, I can see that. But I'm not so sure that either today, tomorrow, or in a week, next year, you will ever be able to say, oh, yes, someone, 2 actors, an actor and actor, are there doing this. Not true. So you can also do this with music. I'm not sure that I can do this, but let's see if I close myself a bit nearby. This is quite amazing. And of course, there is no voice, there's no human being, there are no violins, there's nothing. You get the gist. So recently, working also in the context of this lecture, how can we possibly, for example, in the literary context, describe this? Well, in literature, we have already distant reading when you use digital tools to read, for example, the whole Shakespearean corpus. There was not distant writing yet, but it doesn't take a genius. This is what's going to happen increasingly. And I wouldn't be surprised if not the students who did the PhD with me, but your PhD students will wonder, how did we ever wrote all that stuff ourselves? They will look at us and say, you were actually washing your dishes by hand? You were doing your clothes every day? You were baking your bread? You were writing your emails? Amazing. Were there cars at your time? No, that's my students. Like, did you have phones? Because they also get carried away. It is not sort of implausible that a lot of the content that we produce today will be produced indirectly. We've been there before in a strange way. If you go to Italy and you look at any Madonna or Virgin Mary, most likely it was commissioned by someone. The painter was asked to do it that way, in that color, with that background, for that amount of money, etc. The difference was that between the individual commissioning an artifact and the artifact, there was another individual, another person. Today, we have a piece of AI, but there are resemblances here for anyone who wants to do a bit more research on this corner. Plenty of consequences. The one that we focus on today is the one in yellow. But copyright on training data, of course, we know that is a complete mess at the input. IP, intellectual property, on produced content at the output, also messy. Plagiarism everywhere, including in science, and poor content, because our ability to spot, and I speak now as editor of the journal in philosophy and technology, trust me, they're getting better and better. The quality is not that good, maybe, but it's publishable. And all of a sudden, boom, you have a lot of semi-rubbish that is polluting the top thing, the data on which you are training those items. In medical research, as you know, is happening extensively. Reliability, trustworthiness, no, the hallucinations of these things are ridiculous sometimes, no matter how powerful they can be. Uniqueness of our input or output. More on this in a moment, but of course, what is the future of content? So to talk about that, let me take a step back, because at this point we have a bit of framework, the introduction. We have a bit of background, so to speak. We need to talk about content, content generated by AI, so synthetic content, artificial content. We're still discussing the terminology. But what exactly are we talking about when we talk about AI? That is a terrible question to ask. I cannot remember the number of conferences where someone smartish raised their hand and says, oh, but what you really mean by, and they speak in italics, by the way, bold italics. How they do it, I don't know, but they speak in bold italics saying, what do you really, really mean by AI? And there is no answer to that question, because it's an archipelago of disciplines, technologies, etc. So the honest answer is an umbrella concept. However, there's a serious answer, which is, the legal answer. When you devise a piece of legislation, that legislation applies to something. And you need to be clear about what you're targeting and what you're not targeting. If the speed limit applies to cars, well, that is a definition implicitly of what a car looks like. If I'm on a bicycle, that speed limit does not apply, so something else. In other words, often the normative framework provides the ontology of its own referent. This is a classic. You have in yellow the executive order by the current President of the United States last January. If you read it tells you what they mean by artificial intelligence. Now, there is a bit of a tricky thing here. The blue bits, predictions, recommendation, decisions, there's something missing. Content. Why is it missing? Well, because if you read carefully, at the bottom, there is that 15 USC 94013, which is actually a piece of legislation passed, I think it was 2020, way before the ChatGPT moment and the release to the public. And that piece is a piece of legislation dedicated to small and medium enterprises and their advantages or disadvantages in the American economy, blah, blah, blah. It was passed by the Trump administration. They needed a definition of AI, and that's what it is. Now, from that moment onwards, anybody, like the worst student in the classroom, have been copying and pasting the same definition, no matter how the technology changes. So today, we have Gen AI is not just now the old-ish neural networks, but it doesn't matter. They keep it that way. You wouldn't be surprised by the next slide. This is the AI Act. Prediction, recommendation, decisions, but first of all, content. Well, because it was written much later. They learned the lesson, and so Brussels did a better job than Washington. So according to Washington, whatever executive order you get, first Trump administration, Biden administration, second Trump administration, is based on a definition of AI that does not cover, for example, social media, or your Netflix, or the videos I just showed you. It doesn't talk about content at all. So you can't simply not say, oh, look, but the AI Act does. Now that is the world in which we're living. So what kind of AI are we talking about? An AI that needs to be regulated. This is something else I thought I throw it out there because I think it's important to sort of clarify a little bit about what happens when you legislate by AI. We'll come back to the content in a moment. But this map, which is from the latest Stanford survey, is a few months old, shows you where the legislation is more intense, the dark countries, Russia and the United States. Remember that story? Oh, no, we in Europe, say in the more inclusive Europe sense, UK included, we legislate, they innovate, always so. Well, it's not true. Why it's not true? Because we look only at the federal level. And of course, the federal level, they don't do anything. Washington does not legislate because they don't think it's their job. So they leave the job of legislating on, regulating any technology, state by state. And the states have been more than active in producing legislation about AI, in fact, on data protection and so on. The last meeting I organized with the state senators at Yale, we had a great time. And we discovered that they are incredibly sort of productive in terms of more and more and more rules. The trouble is that any small, medium enterprise in the United States has a nightmare because Oklahoma will have a different legislation than Tennessee or California or Connecticut or Colorado. So at some point, maybe revisiting the whole narrative, which of course is the big companies narrative, we don't legislate, you shouldn't. My dear, that's simply not true. You legislate a lot, it's just state by state, and then you have to put everything together at the end of the job. Nightmare. But back to us and content. How did we get here? So of course, everybody knows here in this room, so this is more maybe for the occasional person online. When I used to teach these things as a mathematical logician a long, long time ago, AI was a branch of mathematical logic, pretty much, depending on who was teaching it. Today is a branch of statistics. We move from deduction to association or correlation. That move has made possible the incredible. For another day, but I know you know, but some people also need to hear this when they are home, the resistance of the AI community, the symbolic one, against the neural network, etc., was so robust that they actually sunk the whole program for a decade or so. It was only because basically this thing was working so magically well that everybody now is converted. For another day, for another lecture. Back to us. So what kind of AI are we talking about? Well, the old AI, and this is the unorthodox moment where I apologize, the philosopher, what do we know? Good old ideas. We make a marriage between biology and engineering, and we create machines, artifacts, engineered, that can actually think. Maybe a little bit, maybe badly, but they can actually think, like a rat, like a mouse, like a human being, better than a human being. So a marriage between, imagine, biology and engineering. What I think we really have done, oh, this is still the narrative, by the way, from the open AI of the world. Oh, this is going to be so terrible, it's going to be so powerful, no, singularity is coming. Yeah, whatever. I don't think so. The alternative seems to be much more intelligent and interesting. We're actually creating a divorce between agency, on the one hand, and intelligence. What we are building are artifacts that can solve problems and or take care of tasks successfully in view of a goal as zero intelligence. And that's a miracle. Because until yesterday, if you wanted to park a car, you had to use some intelligence. Or at least that was what they taught you. No, there are plenty of people who don't exercise any intelligence, never mind. Not their car. And of course, not my iPhone when he plays chess. No, I bet can win anyone here at zero intelligence. So at least in terms of what we have today, we have AI at zero intelligence amazingly successful. Now, the immediate objection is, look, if it is a divorce between agency and intelligence, how does it work? You said a moment ago that if you play chess at zero intelligence, you lose. You park at zero intelligence, you bang against something. You do the dishes at zero intelligence, it's a disaster. So how come that this stuff is so good? Well, because what is happening is, see, at the very beginning, we are shaping the environment around these technologies. We have become increasingly digital, and that's why they work so well. So in other words, we've done this. Microchips, people connected, devices per person, time spent online, computational power, networks, and data. Data we've never seen before. This picture, I know you've seen it a million times, but look at the bottom left. That's the important bit, not the top right. The bottom left, it says 2010, 2 zettabyte ever generated by humanity since the day we scratched cows on the wall of a cave. That is Alexandria and its manuscripts. It's all the silent movie we ever produced. Anything we ever said aloud, it's all in those 2 compressed zettabytes. They might have got it wrong. It's colleagues from Berkeley, the information school there. Suppose they got it wrong badly. I mean, seriously bad, 50% wrong. It was not 2, it was 4. And it was not 2010, it was 2000. No matter how badly, all the data we have been generated by us, the living people here. Everything. That's quantity. Of course, that includes Shakespeare and lots of cats on Facebook, as we used to say. No one is on Facebook anymore, so that joke doesn't work anymore. But you can see that that is the reality within which AI swims like a fish. We scuba dive. So inevitably, in that world, AI can only be successful, and increasingly so. The bigger this environment, the more digital we become, the more online we all live, the better all this will work. So the fact that my thermostat knows that I'm coming home and can actually turn, literally, smartish, my central heating is because it's connected to my mobile phone, which of course is geotagged, which of course knows where I am because it's in my car. So all this works magically well, but because we have moved the whole ontology online digitally. Now, this is the real world in which we are successfully implementing AI. Now, of course, it's the typical 3D robotics because we cannot imagine this in terms of digits and software and so on. But essentially, we are transforming the world into a warehouse, if you pass me the analogy. A warehouse like this is built for the robots. It's not built for humans. If you look at, carefully where the humans are behind defensive barriers. You can see in the background, see this particular net. This is to defend humans so that nothing wrong happens. Meanwhile, the machines are perfectly fine. Now, in this world, you put the strawberries in such a way that they can be collected by the robots, not the other way around. You don't build a robot that goes there like Luciano, like an android. Is this strawberry okay or not okay? You shape the strawberries around the robot, and then it works. Oh, I have plenty of stories where people didn't do that, and the disasters were immense. Walmart, for example, if anyone wants to check online, nothing that I just know myself. So, finally, the content. We got the introduction, we got the background, we got the context, a bit of AI, legislation, what's happening to AI revolution, how we are transforming the world into an AI-friendly, meaning that when it is friendly, it works. When it's not friendly, it's a piece of junk. That's my car in the countryside. Driverless car, hands on the wheel. There is no signal, end of the story. How do we analyze the content in such a sort of speedy environment where things are changing on a daily basis and so on? I thought that using these three little ways of analyzing stuff, we call them models, there's a big word, the input process output model, the communication model, and the supply demand model will help to have a sense of where content is going. And that's the second, basically final part of this lecture. So this is known to everybody, but trust me, I was a postdoc when someone actually said that I had plagiarized their paper. I was terrified. I also have zero memory, so I thought, there you go. I probably took notes. I forgot that this was taking notes for someone else. I thought it was mine. I put it in my paper, and I'm ruined. So I emailed these guys. I said, well, you use this input, process, output. That's mine. Okay, I can relax. This is fine. The guy is insane. We don't even know who ever came up with this little thing. But what matters here is that we have the wrong interpretation of this input process. So imagine we are from years ago, second half of the 20th century. We learned something from consumerism. What we care is the output. I don't care about the input or the process. Is this a good pair of shoes? I don't care who made it, how they made them, price, quality, output is everything. Now, if the output is everything, then your university starts being geared around the idea that the output, meaning, for example, the essay, is everything. I don't care, how you do it, as long as the essay is great, that's what I'm going to grade, the essay, the output. Now, if you have an output-oriented mentality, clearly, the conclusion is the video is as good as yours, you are useless. I don't need you, end of the job, end of the interest in your production, because I look only at the output. But actually, is the uniqueness of the process that for a long, long time, we price hugely. Now, if those pair of shoes, that's the Italian in you, inevitably, is handmade, well, there's a difference. You pay them a lot more. They are very uncomfortable, by the way, but the pleasure of having a handmade pair of shoes is just for you. The two kids here, God knows whether they clean their hands or not, but the cake, has been made by them with their own hands. Now, jokes apart, the reason why parents have those pictures on the fridge is not because they are pieces of art, because clearly anyone and his uncle can do something better. It's because little Johnny and little Mary made them. So it's the process that matters and who made that thing. Now, in this context, therefore, we hopefully will reevaluate, thanks to AI, the process and the input. We might actually get out of a consumeristic view that all that matters is the output. But maybe, for example, I need to talk to the student to see whether they actually understood what they're talking about and not just grade the essay. The uniqueness of the input as well. I mean, we forget, and trust me, a lot of interactions with companies is always the same thing. Why do I need anyone in my company if these things can do things for them instead of them, better than them? Well, because someone has to decide which question to ask. And that is, your average ChatGPT user, the first thing that you need to evaluate. What question to ask? Can you actually assess the quality of the answer? And what do you do with the answer? These three things are not left to your AI in question, but something that remains increasingly on our shoulders. In fact, if anything, this requires increasingly more intelligence on your side. You need to ask the right questions, not any question. You need to know a lot in order to make sure that all those hallucinations will be spotted. And you have to have a plan in terms of what to do strategically with it. I said the three models, so we're moving forward. So content will be about these three things, the question, the checking, and the use. Will also be a matter of production on our side. This is a bit strange because we take it for granted these days in terms of, for example, photographs. We take pictures and it seems strange to be asked, do you take your own picture? Yes. What is your problem? You don't go somewhere and ask someone to take pictures and choose the pictures that they make. So no, I take my own pictures ordinarily. Why don't you do that for movies then? Because that's not what we're doing. What we're doing here, in terms of this typical channel, you have some information, transmit, process, destination, received. We can request content, but we don't produce that content. Just because the cage is so huge and the boundaries are so wide, the menu, in other words, from which we can choose, the usual Netflix, is so endless, we don't see the boundaries. But our choice is determined by someone else. The choice of movies available at any given time is determined by those who produce the movies, trivially so. It doesn't have to be that way, and it may not be that way, not too distant in the future. We can have assistant in content management. No, you like this, you may like that, yes. Or other similar things, but this is not demand-driven. For the demand-driven, we need the third little model, not the supply-demand. At the moment, the supply, I stay with the movies, but imagine films, but it could be for your average novel, your next textbook, anything that is content. At the moment, we rely on the fact that those who supply the content try to double guess what the demand is. Does it sell? Second series. It's not selling, stop it now, no, three episodes, goodbye, pilot, and who cares? But with AI producing content by having prompts on our side, you can see the model here. At some point, tomorrow, I will just go online and check 3 lines, minor character, Star Wars, romantic, adventurous, no blood, no violence. Click, boom, and I get my own personalized movie, probably in a matter of next day. Because I remember, with like other people here, that I used to print on a laser printer that way. You send the message today, you can actually collect the laser printed, one laser printer in the whole university tomorrow. So it will take a little bit of time, but tomorrow, tonight, half an hour. And people will wonder, did it take a day before you had your movie produced? That's amazing. Now, what was that? Must have been early of this century. Totally doable. It depends on the commercial side, not on the technical one. So we're looking at the emergence of my content, my personal content, my music, my stories, my everything. Now, it doesn't mean that we are going to do it, by the way, but that is doable. I mean, we can fly sonic speed with a Concorde. We're not doing it. We tried, we didn't like it, too expensive, too dangerous, too noisy, so we're back to normal. But doable, totally doable. Totally doable that there is a startup tomorrow that provides the novels you like. I love Jane Austen, but I run everything. I'm running out of Jane Austen. Can I have another Jane Austen, please? With that character, which I love that character, but it doesn't play much, and so maybe? Why not? Content cultures. We don't slice the world in this way yet, but content is so important that I wouldn't be surprised if next year or the year after, Akings, someone will offer a course in content culture. Comparative, a little bit of AI, a little bit of literature, maybe a little bit of philosophy, engineering, meeting STEM, meeting humanities. And we have some precursors, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. They give you the idea. It's just that I am producing the whole thing. So I take a little movie and I put it online. That's not what I'm talking about. But it gets close. I just want to send 3 or 4 lines. to get their movie, and surprised me. So, look, I didn't quite imagine that this thing between, I don't know, Godzilla and Star Wars was going to work this way. No, my taste in movies is terrible. So, some final considerations, and then we stop there. We might get a little bit of less consumeristic culture, not the sort of business model. That is going to stay with us because we cannot wait to eat the next X. But consumerism as the culture that tells you the only thing that matters is output, well, maybe that would be a challenge. Because if the output is not that matters, well, that piece of AI does it better than anyone else. So if all that matters is the pizza, trust me, I mean, with plenty of experience, 35 years here and 2 years in the United States, I can tell you that some frozen pizza is way better than something you buy from the shop. So why go into the shop? Because they made it, because the atmosphere, the process, the input, the people. Not for the pizza, because sometimes the pizza is not that good. So same thing with the cake made by the two kids. Remember, they did not wash their hands. So, but is there no cake? Less synchronization, because we already broken that sort of paradigm some time ago. There was a time, and it's in living memory still, where there was the BBC at that time, the newspaper, the whole nation was synchronized on the output of information at their pace. That cultural sync has disappeared a long time ago with internet and the web and etc. The 24/7, blah, blah, blah. But even more so, because I will have read a new novel written, quote unquote, or distant written by an AI in the style of Jane Austen that no one else has ever read. Now, the funny thing is that if we fast forward, it might be so good that I might actually start sharing it. So maybe other people will have read the one that I ask AI to produce, because a lot of people also like the same Jane Austen written by AI with a prompt by Luciano. But we're talking probably something that I won't be able to see. I'm 60, I give myself 100, so I'm not sure that it's going to be in the next 40 years. I know, we're all mortal here. That's the bad news for everybody. But it's possible. Less monopoly on semantic capital. Content in general. Who produces content? Well, this has already been transformed profoundly by digital culture. We complain a lot about fake news, about the rubbish online, about how much content is not properly moderated on social media, but bold, italics, capital, 24 times Roman, but the freedom that each of us has in terms of putting online, bypassing the usual channels, making your voice maybe heard, putting that message in that silly bottle that perhaps someone will collect one day is unmatched by any culture. We don't have people controlling what we want to say or not unless you have a regime, but that is violence. But in terms of media, you can publish whatever you want. You can put a video everywhere, and that will increase in terms of prompts and AI, if AI does a good job. There's less monocultural approach to content, more pluralism, because I might produce that particular Jane Austen, but maybe you are from Brazil, and your Jane Austen from Brazil, that would be my wife, might be very different from the Jane Austen that I want. So again, we're breaking down some barriers that we just assumed historically would be impossible to remove. Democratization of content production. I don't have to explain what democratization means in this department, but for the politically oriented person online, I'm not talking about, of course, the political democratization. I'm talking about the wide distribution, dissemination of content production in the pockets of anyone with a decent piece of hardware. Polarization, global versus local content. Not everything is rosy in this picture. Fragmentation, polarization, people who will have never heard of Jane Austen because they produced a Hemingway and they read only Hemingway, and the Hemingway they like. But Jane Austen didn't actually make it. And so on and so on. Finally, we're almost there, more content cultures. I think that this is something that we need to embrace rapidly. Content studies doesn't exist as a discipline, I check, but we could establish it right now, right today with this lecture. And I did speak to Springer, and that's online. So Springer, I hope you're listening. I said, look, guys, because I edited this journal, I said, why don't you launch a new journal? Content studies. And believe it or not, they didn't laugh. They say, well, that's an idea. Maybe tomorrow. Thank you.